You're watching Slingshot the Podcast, the misunderstood voice, the culture's power. Today's episode is entitled Locked Up. Locked Up.
They won't let me out. Yeah,
Go ahead and
locked up.
sing
We
it.
in the building.
You know, all these episodes we're having, if you all have noticed this, you've been watching us for some time, all of our episodes are named after a song title. So Locked Up, and as you referenced, Akon.
Akon in the building, man. Let me talk. Let me just read some of these lyrics that, and that was a hit too.
Oh, that was a hit.
That song. So it says, these are some of the lyrics. Seems like they forgot about me. Commissary is getting empty. My cellmate's eating food without me. Can't wait to get out and move forward with my life. Got a family that loves me and wants me to do right. But instead, I'm here locked up. They won't let me out. Yeah, so shout out to Akon. Yeah, no doubt. Mm-hmm.
Well, Akon, and you did say it was a hit, 2004, from his debut album, Trouble. And it hit the Billboard Top 100. It peaked at number 8 in the United States. And guess what? They liked it all over the globe, too.
Yeah, that was cool.
So it hit the top 10 on the charts in Ireland, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Spain, and Switzerland hit the top 20. So it had some meaning to a lot of people out here.
Yeah, it was different and relatable. So a lot of people love that song. Yeah.
Well, when we have an episode entitled Locked Up, I think we're all assuming that we're going to talk about incarceration.
You already know.
And since we're based here in Pennsylvania, we're going to talk about over-incarceration.
That's right.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about the over-incarceration state of Pennsylvania, where we are, how this also relates to rural Pennsylvania, suburban, urban, ex-urban Pennsylvania, when we talk about that, and a little bit about a place that I went to not too long ago when I was out in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and that was hearing the stories about one of the most notorious prisons in the world, the Angola plantation, I call it, Angola plantation still. It's a former working plantation. And voting rights here in Pennsylvania for the formerly incarcerated and those who are incarcerated in this moment, and the voting rights they have in this moment.
They still wear stripes. They still wear the pinstripes. And I think they still work out in the field with the pickaxe and all that down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's wild there. Well, let's start there. Since you're going to Louisiana. Louisiana has my heart. We talk about the ancestors a lot.
Yeah, the ancestors.
You all know. My last name is Kenner, and when you fly into New Orleans, Louisiana, you fly into Kenner, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And that is the ancestral home of my ancestors who were enslaved.
Yeah,
Louisiana.
That's the ancestors right there. They're still over there. They beat the drums for them. Yeah.
So I make sure I lift this up every time I talk about New Orleans and Louisiana. When you fly in, you're flying into my town, right? Flying into my town. Well, Angola Plantation Prison, located about 45 minutes outside of Baton Rouge, is a notorious, I don't even know where to go. It's a notorious plantation, a working plantation in the year 2025.
Yeah. Literally, it's one of those places where if you have a picture of prison, like in your head, like the picture of what prisoners do, that would be the poster child of it. I think they honestly still break rocks with sledgehammers. Then, I mean, literally, they're doing hard labor.
I watched a documentary that was done on Angola, and they are literally picking cotton for 2 cents an hour. They are picking cotton in the year 2025 in Angola prison for 2 cents an hour.
Crazy.
And if they don't pick it fast enough, or if it's too hot out there for them one day, they put them on what the incarcerated there call the dungeon of Angola. And it is an additional punishment in a place of punishment for not picking cotton fast enough in the year 2025. There were many, not a dry eye, pretty much in the room watching that
Yeah. I don't, I'm trying not to get kicked off the podcast, so I'm gonna just let you finish. Cause mm,
I haven't had anything upset me as greatly as that has in a long, long time. The Angola prison, and we had the pleasure of being joined by one of the leads of the documentary, formerly incarcerated there on the plantation, and the trauma he's still going through. But he tells his
mm,
story, almost every day, running, leading an organization, and he has to live over and over again with the trauma.
yeah.
Yeah, they're literally out there picking cotton for 2 cents an hour.
That's so crazy though. Like, mm, mm,
Well, we are in Pennsylvania, and we are one of the most incarcerated places on the planet.
mm,
Not in Pennsylvania, on the planet Earth, Pennsylvania is. According to the Center for Rural Pennsylvania, as of 2023, nearly 3.37 million people, that's 26% of Pennsylvanians, live in rural counties in Pennsylvania. Elk County, Clarion County, Venango County, places I haven't been in Pennsylvania. And in the last few years, rural Pennsylvania population has become more racially diverse. But why? It's because folks of color are incarcerated in these prisons in rural Pennsylvania. According to Prison Policy Org, Pennsylvania has an incarceration rate of 589 per 100,000 people. That includes jails, prisons, immigration, detention. I was just at one, Moshannon, outside of Penn State, 30 minutes outside of Penn State, Moshannon Detention Center. Yeah, it's like one of the largest detention centers for ICE in this moment
Interesting.
in the whole Northeast of the country. There are approximately a total of 96 state prisons and county jails in Pennsylvania, with 19 of them located in rural Pennsylvania, making Pennsylvania one of the most incarcerated states in the country, with more than 66,000 Pennsylvanians residing in our prisons and jails.
Do you have the racial background or breakdown of that?
I don't have the breakdown, but obviously I don't want to say obviously, but disproportionately, this is black and brown folks. Yeah.
Of course.
When I originally started the organization, New Pennsylvania Project, and as a voting rights organization, we're trying to do voter registration. I had a data consultant kind of look up where in the population are folks of color living that are not registered to vote, and one of the top places were the counties that had the jails. So I'm assuming I need to go up to Elk County and register all these black folks, only to find out that the black folks in Elk County are all locked up in jail, for the majority of them. Right.
Wow.
And we won't even talk about prison gerrymandering on this episode. We'll do that maybe another time unless our guest today might want to talk about it. But, that's another thing. So we have an over-incarceration problem in this state, in this country. And it doesn't seem, when there's a rise of for-profit prisons, how do you get out of a situation like this?
Yeah, and this has been an issue plaguing the nation for eons. I remember we talked about being a part of a university, a research one university, and part of my studies were about, especially when you talk about criminal justice, that we were talking about mass incarceration, right, and mandatory minimums, and how the disparities between crack cocaine and regular cocaine, right? We talking about I think it was like one teaspoon of crack cocaine versus 100 teaspoons of powder cocaine was the equivalent. So you're talking about, imagine 100 teaspoons of crack, you're there for life, and so you can get caught with 100 teaspoons of coke and regular powder coke, and you'll be out in a couple minutes in the morning if you make bail, right? And so they talked about the disparities of that, and I remember it so vividly because when you talk about looking at the image of that, looking at one spoon versus 100, you like, it'll blow your mind how they would tend to place sentences, like the football numbers that they would give for crack cocaine was just wild. And then you would have someone in different counties that would do different drugs and literally can have almost a quarter of cocaine on them, and they just get smacked on the hand and you don't do this no more, right? And so it's just interesting, man, when we talk about the differences of how our people is treated versus you have to bring in race. And I hate to talk about race all the time, but you can't get around it when you see the disparities of that.
No.
Yeah.
And it's all on purpose as
Yeah.
well, because, depending upon on what state you live in, not everybody after they're released from incarceration have the freedom to vote.
Yeah.
Some states put a waiting period on it. Some will take it away for a longer period than 5 years.
Mhm.
Pennsylvania actually had a waiting period a couple decades ago
Yeah.
that you had to wait 5 years before you're able to vote in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So, that is an issue in itself.
Which is I didn't mean to cut you off, but which is important with what you always talk about, how important it is to vote for the judges.
Yeah.
That they never tend to promote in terms of voting. The judges, that election right there is probably the most important. Actually just passed, right?
No, well, the primary.
The primary,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so, that's why I love the work that you do, that you advocating and you're constantly talking about the importance of voting. You're knocking on doors, trying to get these people out to vote. I mean, you talking about returning citizens that some of them didn't even know that they can vote now, which is
right.
a big deal, right? And
That's
so
right.
that whole, activism that you do based around that is just wonderful work.
Yeah, before we get in, take a little break here.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, if you're watching today's episode, Locked Up, and you are someone who was formerly incarcerated, you absolutely have the freedom to vote here in Pennsylvania, unless your crime had something to do with voter fraud, or you're currently living in a halfway house and you're sentenced there as part of your sentencing, then you're not eligible to vote right now. But everybody else, you're all eligible to vote. So we want to make sure we make that very clear. Now, those of you who are watching this from Florida, if you're watching this from Texas and some other places, they keep changing the rules. Florida, the voters in Florida said, give folks the vote, give them the franchise.
Okay.
And then the legislators went back on that word.
It's crazy.
Of what the voters asked for. So we're going to come right back. And when we do, we're going to be joined by someone who is in the ecosystem with myself and had the pleasure of getting to know him for quite some time. And we're going to be joined by Robert Saleem Holbrook. He is the executive director of Abolitionist Law Center, and he's going to be with us when we return. Be right back. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Slingshot the Podcast. This is more than just a podcast. This is a movement to inspire and motivate and mobilize. This is for those whose voices have been unheard, misunderstood, undervalued, and underserved. We're going to talk about sports, culture, entertainment, and we're going to use this to build power in our communities. And we're back. You're watching Slingshot the Podcast. Today's episode is entitled Locked Up. That is off of Akon's hit record. So we're joined today. We have a special guest in the studio. Thank you for coming on out to Delaware County.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, we are joined by Robert Saleem Holbrook. He is the executive director of Abolitionist Law Center. And in the previous segment, we're going back and forth about Angola Plantation Prison. What's your thoughts on what's going on down there in Louisiana?
Oh man, Louisiana has always been, a terrible place. Angola, as we all know, is a prison plantation. It got its name Angola because of the people that were enslaved. The Africans who were enslaved there came from Angola. And anyone who's ever been to Louisiana, New Orleans, for me, I love going to the city of New Orleans. I tell everybody that, except for when I get outside of its boundaries. It's can be like a mirage. You're in a beautiful city, a very diverse city with great food, great people, great partying. But once you venture outside of it, you're like, oh, okay, we're like 30 years behind back here. This is the country. This is the sticks. And Angola encapsulates all of that oppression, all of that racism in Angola. So I know Norris Henderson down there in Louisiana, who runs Project Vote, who did 30 years in Angola. It set the trend for the country in terms of not enlightenment, but how to degrade, humiliate, and oppress people. So whenever I think of Angola, it did, especially when I think of the Angola 3, the political prisoners down there that spent 50 years in prison for protesting the abuse and degradation of people, black prisoners in Angola. It definitely brings a visceral reaction when I think of Angola.
I do advocacy work in Pennsylvania. We're in Pennsylvania, but I'm going to work. Whatever I can do, I'm going to do some work on
Absolutely.
shutting down Angola prison. That should not exist in the
Yeah.
year 2025.
No, definitely. Absolutely not.
Well, we're grateful that you're with us today, and we would
Thank
love to hear your background because I know that you have a flavorful background.
Yeah.
And, we want to hear about how that's impacted your life and how it got you to where you are today and leading an outstanding organization, doing good work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I was born and raised in Philly, North Philly. I came up in a household that my father was a member of the Wheels of Soul, so he was outlaw, black motorcycle, 1%er. Um, he tells a story that he's also functionally illiterate, and so he tells a story of how when he was younger he wanted to join the Black Panther Party, but because he couldn't read and they had political education, he felt ashamed. So when he left out of it because he just couldn't go through the political education courses, his pride, he didn't want to tell anyone that he couldn't read. But then he ran into the Wheels of Soul, and they wore black vests, motorcycle vests that reminded him of the Panthers. So he joined the club. And so I grew up though with a lot of imagery of the Panthers in my household. That famous picture of Huey Newton sitting on the wicker chair with the spear and the shotgun. And then my mother, um, a fierce anti-apartheid activist. She was of German descent. So I grew up in this household that definitely valued struggle, valued liberation, but it was the 80s and the era of protest, I missed it, right? Those of us that was born in the 70s and came up in the 80s, we missed that, that era. And so my era was massive unemployment, the drug game, and Reaganomics, mass policing. Trickle down. Yeah, trickle down. And so my struggle was the streets, so although I came up in this household that valued education, my mom graduated the top of the class at Temple University. That was the crazy thing. A mother that graduates top of class at the university and a father that's functionally illiterate, right? The streets caught me though, pulled me. I went to Catholic school. I rebelled there. I tell people that was kind of my first experience with like racism, going into a Catholic school, because that was around the time when they were kind of like integrating the Catholic schools. And so those of us that were black or brown were going into these all white Catholic schools in North Philly. And that was like the training ground. We fought every day going to school. We fought kids going to school. And on the way home from school, we fought their brothers and fathers because we would whip their ass and they would go home and have their fathers and brothers out there and we would fight them. So, I grew up fighting. I grew up understanding struggle. I grew up understanding the importance of civil rights struggle. Nelson Mandela, I grew up knowing him as a household name. But unfortunately, the streets caught me and I got involved in the drug game. And my actual run in the game was not long. I tell everybody, it was like this, literally months. Because I got in the drug game really just to go to school with new sneakers every day and a gold chain and, to impress the girls, 15 years old. But I didn't realize that wanting to have a new pair of sneakers every day, wanting to go to school with that fat rope chain and all that, it put me on a course where within 6 months, I lost 2 friends, and I was sitting in a prison cell facing a death sentence at the age of 16. So it was that quick. It was that sudden. And so that was my awakening. That was my experience with the game, with that era in the United States, that I just became a quick casualty of it. And many other people in my neighborhood. And the irony of it all was we watched all these other kids, like white kids, when they graduated or when they were going out of school, they were going to like raid Wall Street.
Yeah.
We were going to raid 18th Street,
right.
Our own neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have nothing. We didn't have that outlet, right? And so for me, that was kind of the birth of something's wrong. And also, it's I can't sit here and say I was innocent because I was involved in a drug-related homicide that took an innocent person from our neighborhood, something that that hole is something that you could never, replace. And spending 27 years in prison, that is something that you had to deal with. We had to deal with, own up to the accountability. Um, but it was definitely a personal experience that brought me into this space of this line of work of taking on mass incarceration and the carceral state.
Thank you for sharing your story. You're not alone in it.
Definitely, no, that's the one thing. Like mass incarceration, like I was a child sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but there were 500 other people like me. Pennsylvania had the most amount of children sentenced to life without parole than any other place in the world. And then the United States was the mass incarceration capital of the world, and it had over 2,500 children sentenced to life without the parole. The rest of the world had only a total of 21. So that shows how much of an outlier the United States was.
So tell us how you got out and how you got to be where you are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I got out, and it's really funny because today we were talking about like legal cases, and the impact of seminal cases in this country. And so I remember the whole sequence that opened the door, and it was in 2004 when the United States Supreme Court ruled that children could not be executed. Persons under 18 could not be subject to the death sentence. And that ruling was based on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 38A, that said that children should not be sentenced to death nor life imprisonment without the possibility of release. That contributed to that ruling. And we remember a bunch of us sitting in the law library reading it, and we knew that, this is now going to open up the door to end life without parole for child offenders. So after that ruling came out, and it only impacted at the time 76 people, but the broader impact was over 2,500 children, former children who were sentenced to life without parole. Brian Stevenson picked the issue up. And I mean, listen, it should be a really basic concept, and that is children are different. Children aren't adults, so you can't treat them as adults. That they're capable of redemption, they're capable of change. And the thing about the life without parole sentence is it was treating, and this is not just for children, but this is for everyone, it treats you as disposable.
Yeah.
Right? It treats human beings as disposable. I tell people that there's two features of the American carceral system that really distinguish it from the world and really lay bare how it treats human beings as disposable, and that is life without parole sentences where you could just put something in prison and say, you just sit in there 50, 60 years until you rot away, and solitary confinement, where they keep people in solitary confinement for decades as well. Those two features right there treat human beings as disposable. And so Brian Stevens was like, hey, children are not disposable. They can be rehabilitated. They do have qualities of redemption. When he took on the case of children sentenced to life without parole, shortly after Roper versus Simmons in 2004, 2009, there was Graham versus Florida, where it impacted children who were sentenced to life without parole for non-homicide related offenses. So you had people who were children in Florida who were sentenced to life without parole for carjackings, aggravated burglary, robbings. He won that case, and it resulted in about 120 people being eligible for resentencing. And then the landmark, the seminal case was Miller versus Alabama. That's the case that got me home. And that was the case that held that children shouldn't be sentenced to mandatory life without parole sentences. And that paved the way for over 2,500 people across the country to be eligible for release. Now, we still had to go back to the United States Supreme Court because, Pennsylvania is Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, well, this isn't retroactive. So you 500 guys that got the sentence right now, you still got to serve that. It only applies to people after the court's decision. So it's kind of like, hey, you guys, tough luck. So we had to go all the way back to the United States Supreme Court. And the United States Supreme Court said, hey, it would be absurd for this not to apply to people who already have this sentence. So it's retroactive, and that paved the way for me to be released.
So did they have like time served or something like that?
Yeah, we had to go back down for a resentencing hearing, and this is the one thing too that we had to earn it. It wasn't given to us, because although they said you had to provide an opportunity for release, they ain't said you had to release them.
Okay.
So we had to go in front of that parole board and show that I'm not the person that I was 27 years ago when I committed this offense, or I was involved in this offense. And the thing is, we've always been saying that. We've always been saying, look, give me an opportunity to go in front of a parole board and show them that who I am now at the time of 44 is not who I was when I was on my 16th birthday.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And also look at everything I've accomplished in between that time. Don't go back and look to that night in January 1990. Look at everything I've accomplished since then. And that is something that shouldn't be unique. It shouldn't be something that you have to argue for. It should be like, we're not even the same people in some cases who we were 5 years ago.
How about that?
So we had to earn it. It was no easy walkout for many of us, and some didn't. Some got denied. Some didn't make the cut. It took them multiple times to go up. But we definitely had to earn that. Freedom had to be earned. And it has to be held, because I'm still on lifetime parole. So, that's we call that the invisible shackle. The beast don't want to let you go. Yeah. It's like 8 years later, I've been home, no problems. But I'm still on this lifetime parole. So that means if I live another 50 years, the state will still have me on paper that they could try and snatch me back at any moment. And that's another large problem. That's the collateral consequences of mass incarceration, right? Because this impacts, I'm very fortunate to be the executive director of a law firm and an organizing process that myself and other prisoners and activists on the outside built. But it's a challenge for me to maintain, on parole. So and then you have people on probation, and Pennsylvania has around 140,000 people on supervised release. It has one of the most highest rates in the country.
And I know it's an organization that hire folks that are formerly incarcerated. Probationary officers don't always make it easy for these folks to keep their jobs.
I mean, it's almost, to be honest with you, I tell people all the time, the probation officers are not there to help you get a job, get health care, insurance, navigate freedom. Probation officers are there. If you trip up, we bringing you back. That's it. That's it. They're not there to be your social worker. They're not there to help you, to provide you access to resources or walk you through them steps. It's purely to trip you up and bring you back.
All right, well, we're going to come right back. We're going to come back with Robert Saleem Holbrook, one more segment here, and we're going to talk about the work that his organization is doing right now, the great work that they're doing right now. And I definitely want to talk to you about court watching, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so we'll be right back. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Slingshot the Podcast, the misunderstood voice, the culture's power, at New Millennium Multimedia Studios. All right, we're back. You're watching Slingshot the Podcast, and we are here today with Robert Saleem Holbrook. He is the executive director of the Abolitionist Law Center in Pennsylvania, doing tremendous work. And you got some work going on statewide. You're not just Philadelphia. And I know you have a team out there in the Pittsburgh area doing some court watch.
Yeah. Court watch is one of the programs that we started in 2019. And, we started from the concept that courts, someone needs to pull the cloak, sometimes the hood off of judges, right? It's one of those areas where people know the least about, but they don't understand that judges in the United States determine your rights that you have, and also rights that can be taken from you. They also can determine in cases whether you walk free or you go to prison, right? And I like to tell people, freedom is like oxygen. You're not aware of it until you're deprived of it, And judges are the ones that deprive you of that freedom. So what we wanted to do was put eyes on the courthouse, and we wanted to bring transparency and accountability to a arm of the carceral state that often is overlooked or kind of looks at itself as above the law, which in some cases it actually thinks it is the law. And so we send people into judges' courtrooms to watch them, to take notes on how they are acting in the courtroom, their demeanor toward people in the courtroom, how they are sentencing people into the courtroom. And what those folks do is they come out and they put together reports on the judges. They also, we release these reports to the community so that people can actually see what judges are doing in those courtrooms. Because like I said, oftentimes it is, you don't know what's going on in those courtrooms, and those judges have carte blanche, and they don't like it. I could be honest with you, judges do not like it. But what we also did was, or rather what we saw was that a lot of the people in those courtrooms are suffering from mental health disabilities that are coming up. I mean, we know that most poor people are the ones who are going to prison in this country because they can't afford adequate defense attorneys. So what we're actually doing is we're documenting these injustices in the courtroom, right? Not just the sentencing, but everything that's leading up to the sentencing. How the judge is terrible, how the prosecutor is terrible, how oftentimes the defense attorneys are terrible or they're under-resourced, right? And then how you have this defendant who a lot of times is someone who's suffering from mental health disabilities, really doesn't know how to navigate the court, and actually should be receiving mental health treatment as opposed to being put in prison. So it's one of our more robust programs in Pittsburgh, but we also have a very robust jail oversight board in Pittsburgh. So it's not enough just to watch what's going on in the courtroom. Now we want to hold the jailers accountable for how they're treating people in prison. We want to make sure that, listen, when you're in county jail, pretrial detention, you are innocent, right? And our position is whether innocent or guilty, you should be treated with dignity and humanity. And so that's what our jail oversight board work in Pittsburgh does as well. We take community members to the hearings. We make sure that Allegheny County City Council is present and listening to the complaints, the grievances, and is aware of what's going on in the county jail for people who are incarcerated there. And more importantly, those people are treated with dignity and humanity in that jail.
I got the pleasure to hear from Councilwoman Bethany Hallam out in Pittsburgh at Netroots in Louisiana, and the work that they're doing, to do just that.
That's
bring
her,
humanity back to like folks who are incarcerated.
Yeah, Bethany Hallam. Autumn Red Cross is our Court Watch director. Tanisha Long is our jail oversight board community organizer. It's a great team that's out there, and Bethany herself is impacted.
Yeah.
So she's been in that county jail herself, and is now a county council member. And this is what we need to be doing. We need to be having more people like the Bethany Hallams. We need those people like that in Philadelphia, right? And more importantly, that share our values. Right, and share our politics, because we just don't want to go across the street and say, "Hey, you locked up," and you just, we want to make sure that you have good values and good politics. But that's what's going on in Pittsburgh. It's really exciting out there. So as a Philly boy, I enjoy going out in Pittsburgh and hanging out with my Pittsburgh folks out there because they're putting great work in, and they often get overlooked by the work that's going on in Philly. Because look, I tell people, like it or not, Philly is where the action is in the state, and also Philly is historically has been the driver of mass incarceration, not just in Pennsylvania, but it has been a bellwether for the country. Because remember, we had America's deadliest DA in Philadelphia, Lynn Abraham, for decades. The person that boasted that she sent more people to death row than any other district attorney in the country. Think about that. Harris County, Texas DAs haven't even sent as many people to death row as Lynn Abraham. Fortunately, Pennsylvania weren't killing people the way Texas and Florida and these other states are.
Yeah.
But she put more people on death row, and Philadelphia was part of that wave of lock them up, throw away the key. But we changed that. Krasner's election changed that. But also people coming home, not just me, but there's many other people that came home who said, yo, we're going to give back to our community. Yeah. Right? And we're going to get involved in this political process. We're going to get involved in community work. We're going to get involved in healing work. We're going to get involved in social work. Right. And so that's part of the pushback, the rollback to those decades of mass incarceration when Philadelphia was the most incarcerated city in the world.
Right.
Think about this. We was the most incarcerated city in the world, but one of the least safe, right?
Which
that
tells you that
says
incarceration doesn't make you safer.
it doesn't make you safer. And now here we are now.
Yeah.
Philadelphia is at historical lows. It's so and look, one murder is enough.
Yeah.
But the murder rate is so low now that they don't even have any historical comparison since they've been keeping statistics for a drop. They've been keeping statistics for like 60 years, right? They don't even have a historical comparison.
What do you credit that to?
I think it's the wraparound services. I think it's the 2020 contributed to that. Even though we had that spike in violence, but more resources were put into the field.
Yeah.
More resources were put into prevention. More resources were put into the Defenders Association. More resources were put into the district attorney's office. And certainly more resources were put into the police. And I don't think putting more resources into police make us safer. I think that you have to focus on housing, education, childcare, mental health services, at-risk youth. That's what's going to bring the crime rate down.
Right.
So that's what I believe. It's those wraparound services. But it's also, I think, too, is folks like us who fought that narrative battle. So that when Philly had those 600 homicides and they wanted to go back to stop and frisk, they wanted to go back to, well, let's find a DA that's like Lynn Abraham.
Right.
We was like, no, that's not the solution. What we have to do is we have to ride this out because this just ain't Philly. This is the whole country that the pandemic caused a spike in violence through the whole country, right?
Yeah. So I just want to, you mentioned resources, right? And you mentioned that resources is what you believe attributed to the decrease in crime, right? So what do you say now when we have, our president in legislation now removing monies that support those resources that you're referring to? Do you see a new spike that potentially may happen if you're saying that it was the resources that was part of decreasing crime? What is your thoughts on it?
No, that's a good question because those pandemic funds are depleted now.
Yeah.
States were able to hold on to a lot of them for years, but now they're depleted, and then you got the federal government down that's pulling all of that. So I hope a spike is not coming. The way that we stop a spike, though, is to be firm to our city council members, to the governor, and to the electeds that, hey, look, don't abandon these organizations. Don't abandon this model. Don't sit here and say, oh, we can't fund it because you could fund everything else.
Yeah.
He was about to fund a stadium in Philly that no one wanted. You know what I'm saying? The police budget rises by almost $200 million every year. What you could fund that?
Yeah.
So you telling me that you can't find the funds, to fund our communities, to give our communities the resources? So it's there. The thing is that we have to demand it. We have to fight for it. And just to your point, we have to elect the right people, right, that are going to fight for it and devote those resources to our communities. And also that got the backbone that could stand up to the mass incarceration lobby in this country and more importantly in the state. And it's a bipartisan issue because I tell people all the time, mass incarceration was a bipartisan
Democrats and
issue.
Republicans.
Democrats and Republicans. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've both done a little bit of, you've done a lot more work than I have around Larry Krasner.
Okay.
Right. And I know that for us as an organization, when they were trying to remove him from his position against the will of the voters, that you and your team were, pretty much there, and you're going to be supporting him likely in this upcoming election.
I'm going to put on my C4 hat now, my straight ahead hat. That's our C4 organization. Absolutely, we're going to be supporting him. And his impeachment was something for us.
Right.
That was about democracy. Right. I had to tell people Krasner, that's our guy and all that, but let's get this straight. I don't support anyone from outside of Philly trying to dictate to us who we should elect and who we shouldn't elect. And then after we elect them, you try and take them, remove them, and think I'm supposed to just sit here. Because I don't go up to Lawrence County.
That's right.
I don't go to these backwaters messing with y'all, join up there. Yeah. So my thing is, don't come in my backyard. Yeah. Because you certainly... Well, that was the argument for us as a voting rights organization is that you are trying to usurp the authority of the voters. He was duly elected by Philadelphians. And this is the thing that I tell people, that this is what we're dealing with these MAGA right folks. they're not content with misery in their own lives, but they're not content with what's going on in their own. You don't see us like trying to go upstate, taking something away from them, interfering in their affairs. Don't come down in ours.
Yeah.
And I think that's we have to go back to that. Like, yo, don't come down here with that. You know, we're not gonna tolerate that. And so for me, that fight was like really personal because you were trying to treat Philly like we're like under colonial occupation.
That's right.
Like, you know, these white folks from these rural towns were just like, yeah, we don't care that y'all voted for him. We're gonna take him out. Right. We know what's better.
We know what's better
for you.
Right.
You know?
You know, at the time that we're shooting this podcast, I'm not sure what's happening right now in the world, but we're in an impasse right now with the Pennsylvania budget, and that is including the defunding of SEPTA. So what is it, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, right? So this is all these counties surrounding Philadelphia and Philadelphia itself are in crisis in this moment because in just several days, we could find folks unable to get to work, unable to get to the doctor's appointments, unable to get to school, unable to get to all the places they need to go. And to your point, we're waiting on rural state reps and senators to get their thing together in Harrisburg to fund folks out this way, you know, our coastal elites, I guess,
Right.
we're called over here,
Coastal
whatever it
elites.
is.
And you know what the crazy thing is? It's those rural counties, their constituents are complaining about poor infrastructure, poor roads.
Right.
They're complaining that we don't have public transportation out there. Now, this is the thing that really is the sad part about it. We'll be cool with you guys setting up public infrastructure out there. Hell, we would help you with that.
Right. And have.
Exactly. If you want to create better buses and rail systems for rural Pennsylvania, yo, I support that. I'm cool. I'm good with that.
They need to get to work too.
Yeah. As a human being, I can relate to
Right.
that. Stay out of my area. Stay out of my neighborhood with trying to take something from us.
Right.
And see, that's how politicians play them poor folks, because what they should be receiving is infrastructure. They should be receiving rail lines, buses, so they don't have to drive all over in their big 4x4s. And there ain't nothing wrong with them because we got them in Philly too. Shit, I got a truck. But you should have public transportation in rural Pennsylvania. I support that. You know, you should support our public transportation.
It benefits all of us.
It benefits all of us.
That's right.
You know,
And they cutting them. I mean, I just showed you this article.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Yeah.
the idea of so much cutting and supporting funds to me sounds more, it sounds targeted. It doesn't sound as if it's like a legitimate strategy to save funding or something like that. It seems targeted. It seems more agenda based, right? And so if most of us already know that, right? How can, because most of the conversation that we always have is solutions based, right? And so it's always the how can you question afterwards, right? So how can you fight for the support again if you know that there's an agenda to stop it? It's kind of like, do we just throw our hands up and just say, oh well, and we try to make it on ourselves? What do we do? That's the question.
I mean, well, we got to fight. And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think it's not just as simple as a voting question.
Yeah.
Right? We got to build community power. We also have to build affinity circles in our communities. We have to go back to having mutual aid because some of these services aren't going to be there. And also, listen,
right.
they're pulling these cuts for a reason.
Yeah.
When they're trimming the federal government, where do you think that money is going to? That's going to billionaires, right? When they cut all those government workers, they're lowering wages, right? Those people are losing jobs.
Crazy.
They're going to go into the job market. What is it going to do? It's going to create a competitive job market. What are they? They're not going to raise people raises. They're going to lower them. That's some of those people that got laid off from the federal government. Now they're making probably 1/3 of what they made for the federal government now. In other areas. So everything, and it's also, this is the other thing, cutting all of those government services. Billionaires now are lining up to privatize it.
Right.
So whereas though
Yeah.
before the government was taking care of these things from your tax dollars, which
course,
is
of
how
course.
it's supposed to be,
Right.
now that money is going to go into the private sector.
Right.
And that's what they wanted to do. They don't want it to go back into the government, your taxes to go there, because kind of that's replicating, self-replicating.
That's right.
I pay the government for certain services the government is supposed to deliver. They done flipped it around over here that we're supposed to feel more comfortable with private companies taking care of you, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like healthcare. Every U.S. senator and every elected official in Congress has government healthcare.
Yeah.
And even
Excellent.
after they leave, they keep it.
Yeah, for life,
No, for
right?
life.
It's for life.
You know
yeah,
why?
I know, yeah.
Because it's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But they don't want to extend that to regular folks.
Of course not.
So they want us to go to the private market,
Yeah.
which doesn't care about us. And everything in the private market, at the end of the day, is about the bottom line. How are we going to save money? That's all it's about.
Yeah, the haves and the
right.
haves not, right? Jeez.
Well, this time flew by.
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. It
And
was
we're
great.
coming to a close. And I want to thank you, Robert Saleem Holbrook, for being with us today. We're going to have to invite you back because there's so much more to
I
talk
will
about.
be back. Well, thank you, Kadida. Thank y'all for this show. It's really great.
So it's hard times out here for nonprofits, and you wouldn't be an ED without asking for some money. So what do the people need to know if they want to contribute to the work you all
Thank
are doing?
Thank you for the pitch.
Yes.
They can find us at Abolitionist Law Center. We're online. You can learn a lot about our work through our website. You can learn a lot about us on Instagram. We're not on that thing called Twitter as much as we used to, but definitely look for us on Instagram and go to our website, www.abolitionistlawcenter, to learn about our work. And please hit that donate button if you're really trying to support movements that are building power for our communities.
Outstanding. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to call this an episode. And Akon's locked up.
Locked up.
Well, we have a lot of work to do in this country as it relates to ensuring that everybody who has been formerly incarcerated is reinstated, have the franchise. And we have a lot of work to do here in Pennsylvania. We have really important elections this November. We have judicial, municipal, and local elections. And so you're going to have folks like Larry Krasner on the ballot for district attorney in Philadelphia. You're going to have judges and justices on the ballot for vacancies and for retention voting. And we hope that you make your voice heard at the ballot box. And with that, we're going to call it a day. And we thank you for being with us. Talk to somebody in your life. Somebody in your life is formerly incarcerated, and they're under the assumption right now that they're ineligible from voting. Someone in your life, because they've been lied to. They've been misled. What
Led astray.
Run amok,
Bamboozled.
bamboozled. All those things are happening to folks who are formerly incarcerated. Or maybe they were released when Pennsylvania had a different kind of law, and they're unaware that they actually have the franchise returned. So if you have any returning citizens in your life, let them know. If you're in Pennsylvania, you have the freedom to vote. If your feet are on the street, let's get you into the ballot box. Those closest to the pain must be closest to the power. Have a great day, everybody. I'm Kadida Kenner, and you're watching Slingshot the Podcast, the misunderstood voice, the culture's power.